The 70s were a strange time. Thrillers were messy and less interested in resolving things neatly. These 8 films created new boundaries. Some were buried next to blockbuster hits, but they're all waiting to be rediscovered. Before The Departed and Mystic River, there was The Friends of Eddie Coyle, an ironic title about a guy with no friends. It stars Robert Mitchum as a small-time Boston gunrunner trying to cut a deal with a federal agent in order to stay out of prison.
Well, you're learning something too, my friend, and I advise you to learn it right now.
He's not a mob boss or a mastermind. He's a tired, middle-aged guy running guns on the side just to keep his family off welfare. That desperation is what drives the entire story. It was shot across the grittiest parts of Boston by director Peter Yates, who also directed Bullet and The Hot Rock. He shot inside diners, parking lots, and hockey rinks. But nothing is dressed up, and there aren't any car chases or glamour, just men in bad jackets talking themselves into corners. The movie runs on the slow, creeping dread of watching someone make the wrong moves without realizing it. The film was not well received by the film-going public, failing to recoup its estimated $3 million budget. But it was well reviewed by critics, and today it's among the most highly regarded crime films of the 1970s. Night Moves is a detective movie where the detective doesn't really solve anything. Gene Hackman plays Harry Mosby, a private eye hired to track down a runaway teenager. He finds her, case closed. Except nothing actually gets resolved, and by the end, Harry is more lost than when he started. It came out a year after Chinatown, and the 2 films are basically siblings. Chinatown gives you a villain, but Night Moves just gives you a fog. Harry isn't outsmarted by anyone evil. He just keeps asking the wrong questions. He's convinced he understands a situation, but it's already slipped past him. Hackman plays it perfectly, holding on to this old-school private eye identity while the world completely ignores him. Arthur Penn, who directed Bonnie and Clyde, shot this coming off Vietnam and Watergate, and you feel it in every scene. The creeping sense that no one's really in control, and finding answers doesn't fix anything. That's a very 1975 kind of darkness, and it still lands. Before she was Lois Lane, Margot Kidder played identical twins in Brian De Palma's psychological horror, Sisters. She plays a French-Canadian model living in Staten Island whose separated Siamese twin may have just stabbed a man to death. A reporter across the street, played by Jennifer Salt, witnesses it through her window and starts digging on her own, and the film gets darker the deeper she goes. De Palma drew the premise from a real article in Life magazine about Soviet-conjoined twins who were physically healthy but developing serious psychological problems as they aged. That detail matters because Sisters isn't really just a thriller about a murder cover-up. The back half pulls you into something stranger: hypnosis, fragmented memories, and a disturbing shared childhood that starts bleeding through. Bernard Herrmann, the same composer behind Psycho, scores it like a nerve being slowly pressed. By the time the film shows you where it's actually going, you're already too far in to look away. Rolling Thunder is one of the angriest films to come out of post-Vietnam America. A slow-burn psychological thriller about Major Charles Rain, played by William Devane. He's a Vietnam POW who comes home after 7 years in a Hanoi prison camp and feels absolutely nothing. His wife has moved on, and his son doesn't remember him. He sits through the welcome home ceremony like a man watching it happen to someone else. After a group of men break into his house, torture him, and take the only things he had left, he picks up a shotgun and seeks revenge. Paul Schrader wrote this right after Taxi Driver with the same bruised logic. A man so damaged that violence becomes the only language he has left. Tommy Lee Jones plays his fellow vet, and what follows is one of the nastiest finales of the decade. Jones is magnetic in a role with almost no dialogue, and the two of them together feel like men who left something in the war that they're never getting back. Prime Cut is one of the most casually disturbing films to come out of the 70s, with two of the most commanding actors of the era going against each other. Gene Hackman plays a Kansas meatpacker named Mary Ann, who grinds his enemies into sausage, runs a fake orphanage, and auctions young women off naked like livestock. Lee Marvin plays the Chicago mob enforcer sent to collect a debt from him. Watching these two go at each other is worth the price of admission alone, but the film earns its place on this list long before anyone throws a punch. Sissy Spacek makes her film debut as Poppy, one of the girls at auction, and Marvin pulls her out. The film sits somewhere between a pulpy crime thriller and a dark satire, and it never fully tips one way or the other. Mary Ann's entire worldview is that people are cattle, expendable, interchangeable, and priced by the pound. It's a nasty piece of work dressed up in a wide-open American landscape. It came and went in 1972 without making much noise, which is criminal for a movie this unhinged. Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia is exactly as wild and strange as the title suggests, and then some. Director Sam Peckinpah claimed this was the only film in his career that the studio didn't touch. It follows a broke American piano player in Mexico who finds out a dead man's head is worth $1 million to a crime lord. He knows where the grave is, so he sets out across the desert to collect. Benny, played by Warren Oates, spends a good chunk of the movie alone in a sweltering car talking to a burlap sack in the back seat. He modeled Benny's entire look and manner on Peckinpah himself, right down to the white suit and oversized sunglasses. Peckinpah fled to Mexico to film it after Hollywood kept gutting his work, and you can feel the difference. Roger Ebert called it some kind of bizarre masterpiece when it came out in 1974, while nearly every other critic buried it. The film is a pulpy and weird outlier in the Peckinpah filmography, and Roger Deakins cited it as a visual inspiration for No Country for Old Men, if you're into that sort of thing. Before Fatal Attraction, there was Play Misty for Me, Clint Eastwood's directorial debut about an obsessed stalker, played by Jessica Walter. Eastwood plays Dave Garver, a smooth late-night radio DJ in Carmel, California, who sleeps with a fan after she tracks him down at a bar. He thinks it's casual, but she doesn't. Evelyn starts showing up uninvited, flooding him with calls, and when he tries to pull away, she turns violent. Walter's performance is what makes the film land. She moves between charming and terrifying so fluidly that you're never quite sure which version of Evelyn is about to walk through the door. And neither does Dave. The film doesn't rely on gore or jump scares. The tension builds through her behavior and the slow realization of what this demented woman might be capable of. The film was a financial and critical success, with Walter earning praise for her first major film role, including a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actress. It's one of the darker portraits of obsession the decade produced, and Evelyn still gets under your skin. Nobody has a name, and that's the point in The Driver, one of the coldest films to come out of the 70s. Ryan O'Neal plays the driver, the best getaway driver in Los Angeles. Bruce Dern plays the detective, the cop obsessed with catching him. The detective isn't particularly interested in justice. He wants the win, and he's willing to break every rule he has to get it. But the moral gap between the two men is smaller than it should be, and director Walter Hill never lets you forget it. The driver says almost nothing across 91 minutes. He has no backstory, no friends, no life outside the job. But what he has is a code, and in a film where everyone else is cutting corners and making deals, that ends up being the only thing that separates him from the people chasing him. Isabel Adjani plays the player, a woman who witnessed one of his jobs and keeps showing up without ever fully committing to either side. Despite initial negative reviews and a disappointment at the box office, the film has become one of Hill's most popular films and received more positive critical reception and a cult following in later years. The film ends the way it lives, on its own terms, with nothing resolved and no one absolved.